So, what leadership is enough for the public at that federal level, and how can politicians make a constructive difference in the face of a natural disaster? Or do they just get in the way, as I've said numerous times here? Former Queensland Premier Campbell Newman joins me from our Brisbane studio. Happy New Year to you, Campbell.
Well, Happy New Year, but our hearts, of course, go out to all these people. And for Debbie, who we just heard from, we hope she and her town get through this whole thing, don't we?
We do. What a massive bushfire season we're having. No matter what you believe, no matter what you put down as the cause, it is a massive bushfire season.
Look, it is extraordinary, and earlier in the season, you know, people were throwing around unprecedented, and I personally took a bit of a dim view for that, but I acknowledge that that is certainly the case. But the causes are to be laid where the practical common sense things that Debbie was saying, that's where the causes really are, but perhaps that's for another time and place. But, you know, we actually have to do better in the future. If you do believe in climate change, then it's not good enough to say that it's about sort of cutting Australia's emissions. It's about how do you deal with the fuel load. You have to deal with that. If you don't believe in climate change, same deal. I think we're going to get to the same thing. It is all going to be about land management, mate.
Yeah, but the truth is about climate change, if you believe we're warming, if you believe that natural disasters will increase as a result, you can't believe, if you believe in that science, you can't believe that Australia, with its very, very low emissions, can change the temperature of the planet.
Absolutely, Chris, and you've really got to then pony up and accept that we actually have to do something about bushfires or floods or whatever it is. If you think this is happening, then you've got to stop talking about just cutting emissions. You've actually got to talk about resilience and adaptation, and that's sorely lacking from, if you like, the green side of the argument, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, I offered a platform tonight for two senior members of the Greens party to talk about what we should be doing in this crisis, given the fact that they've now called for a Royal Commission. I don't think they've got any idea, but the offer is now open, and hopefully they'll come to the party sometime in the next couple of days. You had your fair share of natural disasters. As a politician, when you're dealing with experts in natural disasters and weather people and firemen and police and RFS, do sometimes you feel as a politician you're just getting in the way?
Well, look, firstly, perhaps I should quickly just talk about the arrangements, if you've got a moment.
Yes.
In Queensland, and I assume it's very similar to in the other states, you have a thing called the Queensland Disaster Management Committee, which is chaired by the Premier of the state. So Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk fills that role, as I did back a few years ago. And so that committee is to oversee everything that's going on across the state during a disaster, and particularly has the important role, and you've been talking about this a lot in the last 48 hours, about requesting that important assistance from the Commonwealth, for example, the Australian Defence Force. That's where such requests come from. Look, my comment is that I think politicians do play an important role. At the end of the day, they're the people we elect. They are accountable to the community. And in these crisis situations, some of the things that I particularly learnt, and I'd be saying to other premiers and politicians, look, one of the things is you've got to go and fight for the information. You've got to actually go out and check yourself. Don't just sit back there in the Disaster Management Centre and be fed the information. Go forward, see what's going on. It's often worse than people think. Sometimes at the start of a disaster, people aren't getting the message that it really is as bad as it is.
That's interesting. So don't just take the advice you're given. Yeah. Be critical or sceptical of the advice.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll give you an example myself. In the Bundaberg floods of 2013, we were there probably mid-afternoon, and I heard there were a lot of people sitting on the roofs of houses in North Bundaberg. And I was told there was a plan to get in helicopters to get those people off those roofs to save their lives. But when I started to drill down during the committee meeting, it was very, very clear to myself, and indeed a lot of the people there, suddenly became apparent that we didn't have the resources. And literally we had Wayne Swan there at the time. He went out of the room and he got onto the ADF, and we got extra helicopter resources and we saved those people. But if I just accepted the advice I was given that evening, and if Wayne Swan hadn't been there, we'd have had people dying in Bundaberg on that occasion. So again, your role is to challenge. Yes, you've got experts, you've got to listen to them, but you've also got to use your common sense and challenge people on the advice you're getting.
It's interesting. The Prime Minister raised this today about federal governments and state governments working together. I want to play you what he said about the possibility of the various jurisdictions tripping over each other.
That's why the Defence Forces are out there. That's why our agencies are providing for the payments. That's why our agencies are coordinating responses between Commonwealth resources and state resources. That's what the Commonwealth does in these situations, and that's what the Commonwealth will continue to do. And what we won't allow to happen is for governments to be tripping over each other in order to somehow outbid each other in the response. What is needed is the coordinated response that these agencies plan for in circumstances like this. I understand the frustration, I understand the anxiety, I understand the fear, but what I also understand is the need to allow the professionals and the experts who plan and then operationalise these responses to do their job and to give them every support and every resource, from the Prime Minister to the Premier to the Mayor.
It's interesting, he kind of addressed this directly by saying you don't want people tripping over each other. I get the feeling that it's actually working rather well at the moment, Campbell. How would you rate the performance of the Premiers, of the Prime Minister?
Well, look, I'm in agreement with what you've been saying again in the last couple of days. I think that the feedback we're getting, that you're showing, is that yes, the resources are flowing, that the requests for, say, ADF support are being fulfilled, and there seem to be people at senior level in those state disaster groups that are happy with what's going on. And let's be very clear, though, who's responsible here? It's not the Prime Minister. No. It's the state premier of the respective state. It's the head of the fire service in that state, the police commissioner in that state. It's the disaster coordinator for the state. They're the people who have to actually do the job. The Commonwealth are there to provide support when it's requested. If they need money for things, if they need some aircraft, if they need the Defence Force, the Navy, the Army to turn up or the Air Force to do something, it's got to be requested. But at the end of the day, it's not the Commonwealth coming down and telling people what to do, it's those state premiers. And that's why, by the way, I had some sympathy for the Prime Minister in practical terms when he was criticised on going to Hawaii. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, a state premier who went away during disaster, unacceptable. A state minister who went away, unacceptable. But the Prime Minister, at the end of the day, he's just got to make sure the resources flow.
And yet they piled on him. They piled on him. And even today, in the press conference he was at, he was asked 5 questions, almost the same question about what's he going to do about carbon emissions. Josh Frydenberg held a press conference in Melbourne. He didn't say too much. He was asked more than 5 times about carbon emissions. I don't know whether the media doesn't understand it, but this is the way Scott Morrison answered one of those questions.
I've always acknowledged the link, as has the Minister, between the broader issues of global climate change and what that means for the world's weather and the dryness of conditions in many places. But I'm sure you would also agree that no response by any one government anywhere in the world can be linked to any one fire event. And I don't think you're suggesting that here in New South Wales, Victoria or anywhere else. Government's plans on climate change are very clear, and the achievements we're making we've set out well. This year, 2020, is the year we beat the Kyoto 2020 commitment. We don't just beat it by a bit, we beat it by a lot. And we're one of the few countries that can actually say that, and we have the policies and plans to ensure that we will meet, and I believe beat, our 2030 commitments, and we will continue to manage those issues responsibly. Right now, though, as I said, my focus right now to deal with the anxiety in the community is the anxiety about getting support and supplies and getting people to safety and ensuring that our firefighters have every support they need.
I thought the answer was entirely appropriate and well handled, but you can imagine tomorrow we'll still get all of that social media stuff with hashtag blame ScoMo.
Well, look, that's the thing that I'm afraid people on the left are doing. They are clearly politicising this at a terrible time when people are dying. When there's 17 people unaccounted for in Victoria alone in the news this evening. I mean, I think people should just lay off. Yeah. By the way, going back to something you said before, if the Greens want a Royal Commission into this, the terms of reference are right, which includes obviously land management, vegetation management, then they won't get the answer they bargained for, because at the end of the day, that's where the problem lies. And I just simply say that, Chris, as a former local government official, Lord Mayor of Brisbane, as a former state premier, I absolutely say that in this state there is a inbuilt, inherent bias against burning off in the agencies of the state government and Queensland local governments. Can't speak for other states, that's not for me to do, but I can assure viewers that that's the case in Queensland. When I was mayor, and I was asking about burn-offs to protect some of the western suburbs of Brisbane, I can tell you now, I was given every answer. I was blocked. Well, Lord Mayor, we can't do it that way. That's too much, etc. So I saw that at state level as well. Yeah, this issue does need to be drawn out. Yeah.
It does. It does. That's the pointy end of what will happen after the bushfire season. Thank you so much for your time, Campbell Newman. All the best for 2020.
Thanks, Chris. Been great to be with you.
Good to have you on the program.